good. How are you?
Great. I'm doing well. So the last time that I came to visit was for a formal observation, and when I came in for the formal observation, we talked about it was an unannounced observation, and it was around guided reading is when I came in. And following our time together, we had a meeting. We had our post observation conference, and out of that meeting, we kind of came up with some next steps. And some of the next steps we talked about were book choice. We talked about prompting. We talked about planning.
Right.
And during that time, we talked about you would have some meetings with our reading specialists in order to kind of work on those particular areas. And so today, we talked about the fact that I would give you a period of time to work on those areas, and then I would come back and do an informal visit. And today was that informal visit. Okay, so how do you think things are going? How do you think the support has been? How are you feeling about how guided reading is working?
I think it's getting a lot better. I think that the balanced literacy training that I went to, it was definitely a good start. But I think working closely with Mrs. Galarza on guided reading has definitely helped. And we've been to the book room. I've sent her my lessons, and she's sent back notes. And it's all been very helpful and helped me to piece together my lessons according to how they should be structured per PGCPS standard. So I feel that they're getting a lot better. I feel that the students are responding better to the guided reading rotations now, and I can see that they're progressing.
Fantastic. That's all wonderful things to hear. So today, when I came in, I was kind of, again, looking for those same things. And so I focused in today on the prompting piece, the book choice, and the planning. And so prior to me coming, you had sent me your lesson plan, so I had an opportunity to look at it. And I can say that clearly I am able to see a clear beginning, middle, and end, and all of the components for the transitional guided reading lesson plan were included, which is something that was not included that when we talked following your unannounced observation. So those things were included. So thank you for taking the time to put in the work to plan. Have you noticed that when you plan your lessons that the guided reading group goes a little smoother?
Yes, it definitely does.
It definitely. So that's something that we certainly want to continue.
Right.
Okay, perfect. Book choice. So the last time I was here, one of the things that we talked about was that we had two different level groups, and both of those groups were reading the same exact book. And we talked about how we have a book room full of books, and that sometimes we know that the CIM will have book choices for you, right, but you have to pick the book that's going to be best based upon your children's DRA. And so today I saw one group reading Amelia Bedelia, but prior to me leaving, your second group rotated in and they were reading Freckle Juice. So clearly you were able to use two different texts. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing when you go to the book room now?
The first thing I like to do is select their focus and select the book based upon that. So with Amelia Bedelia, there's a lot of dialogue, and my 20 group still kind of robot reads. And so with there being so much dialogue in that book, I thought that that would be the perfect book that we could practice that fluency skill with it. And the events in the story are so huge that we could definitely take what's happened and summarize, and it would be a good kind of first step for them into summer. We've done summarizing before, but they've all as a class had a hard time with it. And so I thought that this book would be the perfect book to summarize because the events that happen in the story are so huge. With the koala group, Freckle Juice has a very clear problem. And so with me wanting to focus on that, I thought that that book would be perfect because the problem is clear. And it's not that there's one problem, he runs into a few problems.
Right.
So having them to go through and pick out those problems so that we can then see what the solution to each one is why I chose Freckle Juice.
Okay, so perfect. So you have a clear rationale about why you're picking the books.
Right.
We're just not using the book just because the map
Because
says use
the
the book.
said so.
Right.
No.
So we're gonna pick the best books that the children need to address their individual or their group needs.
Right.
Fantastic. Okay. So today, I had an opportunity to come in and I watched the guided reading group. It was your transitional reading, so they're on a DRA 20, so it was your BGL group for your class. And so one of the things that I just kind of want to start with is you did a great job at the start of the lesson setting a purpose. You were very clear about today we're going to read for fluency. We're also going to be summarizing. What I also saw you do today is you connected it to what you had done in a previous lesson. So you're making that bridge between the students learning. So that is definitely something that you need to continue to do. You reviewed the anchor chart with the children, what was said, what was meant, and then what Amelia thought in order to kind of help them remember things that we had already read in the story. As also before reading, you said to them, what do you do when you come to a period? What do you do when you come to a question mark? What do you do when you come to an exclamation point? And the children were able to tell you the different things that their voices should do during that time. So again, you're setting them up to be successful when it's time for them to actually begin their reading independently. And the other piece that you did was you quickly modeled for them the difference between what a fluent reader sounds like and what a robot reader sounds like. And they kind of giggled when you did it, so clearly you've set that example for them before. And then you went into introducing the word scattered. And so you said, say it with me. And then you said to them, it means to randomly put things all over the classroom. All over your bedroom or all over some specific place. And you offered some examples. So you talked about putting the toys all over the place, or having them have their Legos scattered all around. But one of the things that I'm wondering about is, how do you know that they actually understood what the word scattered meant? Do you know if they understood what it meant, just based upon your definition?
Right. Well, with thinking back, I don't know. Usually with this group, they're the ones that offer that. And so maybe I've kind of taken that for granted, because usually when I introduce the vocabulary, it clicks and they'll be like, oh, like how I scatter such and such over my room,
Right.
or how so I kind of took that a little for granted and didn't go back and check with them, and maybe say, Daniel, what might you scatter? Callie, what might you scatter? And allow them to give me that feedback so that I know when they come to that word, they not only have the context, but they'll be able to read it.
Right. And so when you look at the template, there are 4 steps. And so the step 4 says, have students turn and talk to each other to explain what it means. And so I think that perhaps you just missed that step. So I want you just to kind of, moving forward, make sure that you give them the opportunity to really demonstrate their knowledge.
Right.
Because today they did not have that opportunity to do that. So you really want to make sure they have the opportunity to do that. The other piece that I kind of wanted to bring out too is that when it talks about the new vocabulary, it says select 1 or 2 words that cannot be decoded or derived from context. And so when they were reading, Daniel got caught on caught, right? So, and you encouraged Daniel to sound it out. But can we really sound out the word caught?
No.
It'd be hard, right? And you struggled with him a little bit in order to try to piece it together.
Yes.
So one of the things I want you to think about too is just as you're going through the text, because clearly for you to pick out scattered, you had to do some pre-reading.
Right.
So as you're pre-reading, also look for those words that maybe can't be attacked through
Right.
those word attack skills, so that then you can just kind of introduce it through your vocabulary piece, right? And then the other piece is with caught, the way that it was used in the story, it wasn't like catch a ball, it was caught her attention. So that's just a totally different meaning.
Right.
So you also want to make sure that you're bringing out those multiple meanings of words too when you're thinking about the vocabulary piece. So as the children went through, in my notes here, some of the things, we talked a lot about prompting the last time, and so some of the prompts that I picked up that you said to them, you asked them things like, what can you do? They might say, I can reread. Well, what else can you do? I can sound out words. So they were really able to give you back some of those things. One of the things that you also said is, does it look right? The student would then repeat it and then try to figure out, what their mistake was. Another prompt that I heard you use with the children was, oh, there's that punctuation mark. And so they were able to kind of know, I'm supposed to read a certain way. One of the things that I also noticed, though, is that sometimes after you gave them that prompt, you would model what you wanted versus giving them the opportunity to show you what you expected from them. So, for example, you said to Callie, you said, there's the punctuation mark. And I think you wanted her to go back and reread to inflict her voice how you all had talked about at the start of the lesson. But one of the things, you modeled it for her though. So I want you to make sure that when you point those things out to them, when you're giving them that specific feedback, that you give them the opportunity to demonstrate versus you modeling. Give them the opportunity to demonstrate and then give them some additional feedback. Then one time you said to them, does that sound right? And it was like instant. Callie quickly reread, and she was pronouncing it title, and it should have been little. And she quickly kind of figured out that she was using the incorrect word. But one of the things that I noticed is that when she did that, I want you to make sure that you're going back and you're saying to her, well, which strategy did you use? Because she got the word instantly, but we need to make sure that they are understanding what strategies they're actually using, because there's so many strategies, so you need to be able to kind of pull that information out of her. Well, yes, Callie, I saw you reread, and you were able to pronounce little instead of title, but can you tell me why? What strategy did you use? And she may say something like, well, I looked at the beginning letter, or, I got my T's mixed up, or something. She may be able to give you some feedback that you can then kind of put on your notepad to give you some additional things to look out for when she's reading independently. I saw you taking notes while they were in the reading group. Can you tell me how do you plan to use those notes to inform instruction?
Well, a lot of the time when I'm taking my notes, I take it based on things I see. So read as if, for example, here I wrote read as if you're talking, because the student still has trouble with that. So that's what I've written down. Reread when something doesn't make sense. The student didn't do that on his own, so I wrote that as one of my notes. Here for Callie, I put modeling, because I noticed that I did model for her, and so I want her to be independent when I ask her to do those things. So I want her to be the model. I don't want to model for her. So that's sort of how I use my notes. Here on a different day, she had trouble pronouncing gym bag. So I wrote that down because after they read, I wrote it out here for them. And I wanted to see what strategy they would use to read that word, because not only did she have a problem with reading it, so did Daniel.
So I think one of the other things too, and you didn't say this, but at the end, when they were finished, when both children did finish their reading, you said to them, I love how you did this. I love how you did that. And I specifically saw you looking at your notes. So you were able to kind of summarize the entire reading group and their positives based upon those notes. You also said to them, we still need some practice reading fluently. You said that to them, reading like we're talking. And then you went back and you had them read passages from the story. Now, one of the things that I noticed, and I'm wondering, did you notice this too? When you all did that reading as a group, did you notice Callie was dominating?
Yes. Yes.
And so, what strategies might you use so that she is not dominating and you're still able to hear the other children as well?
I definitely did notice that and wanted to give some think time. So I think towards the end was when I said, okay, we're not raising our hand, we're just thinking, because Callie is a very dominating student, and Daniel will let her. So giving them that think time so that he understands that she may raise her hand, but Ms. Washington's going to give me time to think.
So we're going to go back 1 second. So I'm talking about specifically when you all went back and you had them practice their fluency.
Okay.
So all of you all were reading together during that time, but Callie was the loudest.
Okay.
And so because Callie was the loudest, how do we know the other children in the group are able to read fluently?
Right.
Because you weren't really able to hear them. So one of the things that I'm thinking about is maybe during that time is having them partner up and then maybe give peer review. Right. So they may read to each other and give that peer feedback while you're also kind of listening in, and then that way you can again make your feedback very specific, because when they're practicing that fluency all together, it's going to be hard to hear whether or not everyone is fluent because they're choral reading versus you being able to hear them independently. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. The other thing that I just kind of wanted to bring out is I know that during the pre-reading you talked a lot about them summarizing. So one of the things is while they were reading, you did a lot of correcting in terms of prompting about their fluency.
Mm-hmm.
But at what point were you checking comprehension while they were reading?
Right.
So that's something I want you to think about, because that's something that did not happen during their independent time that they were reading. So I don't know if they need Post-its where they're able to jot things down, or where they're able to use some annotation. Are you giving them a question that you want them to kind of focus in on? Like if you wanted them to focus on what was said, then maybe you need to specifically say to them, while you're reading, I want you to look for an example of where Miss Rogers said something to Amelia,
mm-hmm.
and she mistook it, and I want you to make sure that you're jotting that down or asking those specific questions even as you're going along. Okay. So just some other little things that I noticed that I just kind of want to bring out is, while you were doing your reading group, there was a lot going on in the classroom,
mm-hmm.
right? And so one of the things, you have to be comfortable asking your group to stop for a second and then just like that, addressing what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, everyone freeze, let's regroup. Do you know what you're supposed to be doing? It takes just a minute to kind of pull everyone back together. So you really want to make sure that you're taking the time to address those behaviors, because you don't want it to get such that it's becoming so loud that you're not able to focus on your group, and the children who are out here are not able to focus on what it is that they're doing. It wasn't a huge disruption, but I don't want it to get to the point where it is so overly disruptive.
Right.
So I think if you take that quick second to address it and then move on, that would be beneficial to your group and to the children who are out here working.
Right.
What was different this time is, on the screen you did have listed what the children were supposed to do, so I think that helps organize them as well. And you were using your timer.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw so many improvements from our last time that we were together, and I'm happy that I gave you that time, because I know when we left the last time, you were teary-eyed and I was
mm-hmm.
hugging. So we wanna make sure, I'm glad that I gave you that time to kind of meet with our reading specialists and really
mm-hmm.
practice and hone in on the things that you wanted to improve upon. I really did see great improvement this time. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm very, very proud of you. So, we can't leave without a next step.
Right.
Right. So, what's your next step? It's not for me to tell you. What do you think your next step should be?
I think it's definitely management of the students out here.
I think that's part of it.
That's part of it, but making sure that I look up, because you see that I had a student who still came and said, my hand's been up for an hour.
Right.
My hand's been up for an hour waiting for the bathroom. So, he was doing what he was supposed to do, but I was so focused on my group that I didn't see him. So he had no choice but to come back.
Let's think about a goal for the group, because we have that's mm-hmm. a great goal.
Right.
But a goal for the group. What do you think a next step for your small guided reading instruction should be?
Definitely the picking of appropriate vocabulary, so that we don't have that struggle with, sounding out's not working, chunking's not working. I don't want them to be frustrated. So reading through in depth and picking out those vocabulary words that can't be decoded, having them partner up so that one student doesn't dominate, and working on asking those comprehension questions, so that when they get to the comprehension, they've already kind of had the conversation one-on-one with me, and they can then direct it towards their writing on day 3 or their focus of the chart.
So I heard you say 3 things: mm-hmm. management of the other children, picking the right vocabulary word. Mm-hmm. They're both second to me. Let me mm-hmm. tell you why. The vocabulary piece, you did well today. You missed one thing, which was them kind of coming together to talk. Mm-hmm. And then I think picking the right words, that's something that comes with time.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So to me, that's so secondary, because you proved today that you're able to go through the process. Mm-hmm. So make that almost like a secondary goal.
Okay. The
management of the room, I think, of course, is a big one, because you just want to make sure that the environment is conducive.
Right.
A few things that you could do is maybe place a team captain,
mm-hmm.
or someone who children can kind of go to.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it wasn't such that it was disruptive, but you don't want it to get to that point. So again, I think it's secondary. But I think the third one that you said, that comprehension piece, mm-hmm. and making sure that you're checking comprehension as you go through, I think that's going to be your next big step. Because I think that you know the prompts, mm-hmm. you know what to ask them. Mm-hmm. I think the next piece is going to be, now how do I prompt and check for comprehension at the same time?
Right.
So that's going to be your next big step. So we're going to continue to work on that. You will continue to see Mrs. Galarza because I think that she's been a great help in doing that. And then I will, in between, while you and Mrs. Galarza are working, we'll do it the same way where she'll give you that coaching feedback in the moment. And then we have a formal coming up, a formal observation coming up. So we'll either do guided reading again for your formal, or I'll come and do it informal, and we'll sit down and have this conversation again. Have any questions? Any comments?
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, keep working, Miss Washington.
Thank you.
You're welcome.